Hi, this is Erhan with the JU NCSA, and today I want to go over how to install Virtualbox and your very own Kali Linux virtual machine in Virtualbox. So let's go ahead and get started. So my virtualization software of choice has been Virtualbox for at least the past 4 years. It's free, it's always been free, and it works quite well. And for today's virtual machine, we're going to go over how to install Kali, and I'll go over two different ways of how to install it. The first is going to be with an ISO image, basically like a CD, and the second one is going to be an OVA file, which is a pre-existing virtual machine. So I'll go ahead and I'll show you both methods. So to start, we're going to go ahead and download Virtualbox. And if this is your first time downloading Virtualbox, you're also going to want to download the Virtualbox extension pack. Lets you use USB drives, a couple things with encryption, gives you a whole lot more access to your virtual machine, and it's a really great thing to have. So if you're starting fresh, go ahead and install the Virtualbox package for your machine. I'm using Windows 10, so I'm going to go ahead and do Windows hosts, but you can also install on Linux and some Mac hosts. There are a couple of chips with MacBooks that don't support virtualization, so you might run into a couple of issues there, but for Windows you should be just fine. And then if it is your first time, also install the Virtualbox extension pack, and then once those are installed, I'll show you how to set those up. So your Virtualbox environment is going to look something like this. I already have a virtual machine that we're not going to be using today, but I'll go ahead and I'll show you how to take care of a couple of the initial things. First, to make sure that the extension pack is installed, you're going to go to Tools, Extension Pack Manager, and then Install. And this will let you basically pick your extension pack, and it will go through the installation there. Once you have it, it will be installed, and it will forever be installed, so you should be okay with that. Moving back over to our virtual machine, I'm going to use Kali. It is very, very useful for cybersecurity professionals, those who are well in their careers or those who are just starting out. It's been my virtual machine of choice, and I've been using it for quite a long time. So I'll show you how to go ahead and install Kali. So first we're going to go ahead and hit download, and you'll notice that there are two images. This one over here for virtual machines, those are the OVA files. I'll show you how to go ahead and grab one of those in a moment, but for our purposes today, we're just going to be using an installer image. So what you'll end up doing is you'll just install the recommended one right now, and then once you install that, I'll show you how to input it into Virtualbox. So to go ahead and start a new virtual machine, you're going to go ahead and hit New. I'm going to go ahead and just name this Kali Linux. This one doesn't really need to be anything too special. And then for the ISO image, I'm going to go ahead, go to my downloads here, and grab the one that I just installed. And you can go ahead and see it's autofilling with Ubuntu. You can change this if you wish to. Ubuntu should be working perfectly fine. I've got a couple that I run on Debian. That's this one over here. But the autofill should be completely fine as long as it's Linux or as long as it's Ubuntu. Either one of those will work just fine for you. Don't need to change anything here. So you'll name it. The folder here is just where it's going to be stored. I just keep it at the default. You can change it if you wish. Then the ISO is the one you just installed. This isn't something you need to worry about a lot of the times. Sometimes for Windows VMs, this is something that comes up quite often. For our purposes here, though, we don't really need to worry about it. This is going to ask about hardware. This is if you'd like to allocate a lot of memory towards it. The defaults are okay. They can be a little slow for some processes, so I at least like to give it 4 gigs of RAM. And then I like to give it 1 CPU. You can go up to 2 if you want to. This is basically like cores and whatnot. But if anything, I like to keep it at 1. Doesn't really need to be too crazy. EFI is a little specific sometimes, but we don't really need it for our purposes. And for the hard disk, 25 gigs should be fine most of the time. If you intend on using this for a lot of projects, you may want to increase this to 80 or 90 or so, even 100 gigs if you really wanted to. For our purposes, I'm going to keep it at 25, though it should be more than enough for what we need. If you want to get really comfortable, you can go 45 as well, which I'll set it to. It's going to ask what kind of virtual hard disk you do. I always do VDI. That works just fine. And then this is if you have an existing one, which you shouldn't really need to use. Then you go ahead and hit Finish, and you'll notice the virtual machine is already at the side here. So once we've got all of that set up, we'll go ahead and hit Start. And then it's going to ask us a couple of things on how do we install Kali Linux. So first, if you click the mouse, you're going to get this guy here. I always leave this warning on just because I need to know what the host key is. But you can navigate with your keyboard. You can navigate with the mouse as well. Graphical install should be just fine for us. Now, you'll notice after I minimize everything that my Windows PC is still running. But now I've got Kali over here on the side also running. And that's part of the sort of fun with a virtual machine, is you can run it in the background of your current device. So I'll go ahead and just set languages. It's going to ask you your typical setup things, and then it will just go ahead and install from that ISO image we inputted before. So now we had a couple of things go through. It shouldn't have given you any issues, but if it did, most of them would be like networking and whatnot, which you can certainly save for later. But now we can go ahead and set the username and password. Most of the time your defaults are just going to be Kali. And if you're using an OVA, that typically is also the same thing. So I'm just going to do Kali as the username and password here. So this is going to ask if you'd like to do any partitioning. The disk in question is not your main system disk, not the Windows disk, but it's going to be the disk you created in VirtualBox. And you can use entire disk, which you can see is around 48.3 gigs, which I set it to 45, so that makes sense. And then you can just go ahead and do all files in one partition. And we'll just leave it at, this is going to ask if you'd like to go ahead and set the partition tables. I'm just going to go ahead and hit yes, and it will go ahead and partition the disks there and start the install for Kali. So this part of the installation process is basically just asking, would you like to install any other tools? I typically leave it as the defaults here. And as soon as the installation is complete, you can go ahead and boot into the new system. It's going to have you hit continue, and then you'll notice VirtualBox is going to go ahead and restart. And then I just like to hit enter on the top one here. It just goes to whatever the default is. Then with that, we have got our Kali Linux system, and if we set the password to Kali, go ahead and log in. It may have just auto done that as the username and password for Kali. And then you can go ahead and see your virtual machine, which VirtualBox does scale it based on how big the window is, causing my machine to freak out. And then that is Kali Linux right there. That's if you're going to do a fresh install with an ISO. And then a couple of things I always like to do when I have my new VM. If I ever need to drag and drop a file from my main PC over to the virtual machine, that's devices, drag and drop. I typically do host to guest. Host is your current machine, and then guest is the Kali machine. Then once you're all set with that, you can disable it. And then I always like to, as a good rule of thumb, instead of doing save the machine state, which is just going to keep it running in the background, I go ahead and just do a complete power off the machine. You can save the machine state if you're in the middle of something, but I typically always do power off the machine. That way it closes completely. And then you can see it is currently powered off. So really quickly, I'm going to go over how to install a virtual machine in VirtualBox if you have an OVA file or an OVF file. So instead of doing new or add, you go to File and you hit Import Appliance. And this is going to go ahead and ask you where your virtual machine is. I have an OVA of this machine right here, so I'll go ahead and install it. Just going to go ahead and hit Open. And then Settings, it's going to be all of the configurations from the machine that made it. And I'll go over a quick thing of troubleshooting that comes up depending on what it is. But you can see it's the exact same here. This installation, same amount of memory, same name. It's under Debian, that kind of thing. And then once you hit finish, it'll go ahead and import the appliance. This is going to be the entire installation period. Because I've already got this virtual machine, I am going to cancel this because I don't really need it. But I will go ahead and show really quickly. Once it's installed, it's not really going to ask you any particular questions. What will end up happening is it's just going to install, it's going to boot up, and it's going to be a Kali Linux virtual machine. So same deal here. Go ahead and hit that. Very rarely I've had an issue where it will just go to the command line instead of booting here, in which case I typically just go ahead do a complete shutdown. But you can notice now that this is a Kali Linux machine, and I'm going to go ahead and show you. This is not a default installation. This is an installation I've used to teach reverse engineering. So I've got a couple of things that are on this machine here that are pretty exclusive to it. That's as simple as it gets. I will show you one quick note of troubleshooting, which is if you're not able to start up the machine, it may be telling you, oh, the network card isn't correct. That's pretty simple to fix. You're just going to go to Settings on whatever the virtual machine is. You're going to go to Network, and where it says Name, you'll notice that if it's not the right one, for example, let's say it was set to this VPN, which isn't going to work. I would just notice, oh, this is my Wi-Fi card, so I'm going to have to set it here. Just go ahead and hit OK, and that should fix the problem. It's a very rare thing that comes up, but if it does, just set your network card to the correct one, and that should work just fine. So that is how to do a fresh install with an ISO image, and that's how to import an appliance if you have an OV8 instead. I hope this video was decently helpful for you, and I very much appreciate your watching. Thank you so much.